right, we're back once again with Natural Freedom League. I am John Wydogen, here again with my producer and co-host, as always, Chill Will Keller.
What's up, brother? How's it going?
It's going good, Will. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you.
Good. And we are very honored to have our guest today from thehealthyamerican.com, Peggy Hall. Hello, Peggy.
Hey guys, it's actually .org. The .com will take you to a probably somebody selling masks or something.
That's funny. That reminded me. I don't know if you know of the organization V is for Vaccine.
Oh, tell me about.
They basically do like events where they basically their signs have vaccine facts. And they're very, bold, big signs, and they just, go to different events and hold them. Lately, since COVID, they've been doing banners on the freeway, and they get a lot of news coverage throughout the country. As whenever there's an article about anti-vaxxers, you'll see these billboards. Well, today, Anthony Fauci did a podcast, and the name of the podcast was V is for Vaccine.
Oh my gosh, that is something.
So everybody in the thread was like, they must know, he must know about your organization. And he's either trying to they're either trying to, when you search for V is for Vaccine, you find this podcast.
Yeah.
It was pretty crazy though,
Misdirection.
Yeah, it is the misdirection. I have to say it's pretty clever. Yeah, if you mistype the address by one letter or something, it definitely takes you to where to buy masks. So I have to give it to the competitors on their cleverness. Imagine if they used it for good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So you created the Healthy American, which basically teaches people how to confront these orders that have been going on since the lockdowns and the COVID-19 alleged pandemic. So how did it come to be, and when did you start the Healthy American?
I felt that everybody thought the way I did, that all of this was just a bunch of hogwash. So it was astonishing to me when I found out that people really thought that what was going on was useful, and that being locked in your homes and being told that you couldn't go to work, and that other people were essential and you weren't. There was an astonishing number of people that were on board with that, not even reluctantly, but willingly and eagerly and giddily and excitedly. It really turned my stomach. And I've been an educator my whole life. Probably started teaching my stuffed animals at the age of 5, and then was a swimming instructor, English instructor, director of teacher training. I have a degree in political science and a master's in international policy studies. So I've always had a fascination with society, with governments, with different cultures, with how people live in communities, why governments are organized a certain way. I'm just kind of a nerd in that way, where I always was curious about civics, and I don't even know if they teach that anymore, but it was just fascinating to me. I actually wanted to be a lawyer when I was in college, and then I sort of came to my senses and realized I cared about truth and the law too much to want to be a lawyer, because I didn't want to just have to deceive people. And I have a lot of good attorney friends. I'm sure they'll take this in good naturedly. But to answer your question specifically, I had a couple of part-time jobs a year ago, and one was at the community college teaching English, and another one, kind of my fun community, teaching water, fitness, exercise. I've been in health and wellness for many years. So when it came with all of this, it encompassed my interest in health, in politics, and then also advocacy, because I've done a lot of activism in terms of animal welfare. And so I have some understanding of how government works. And I personally have worked for the federal government, the state government, county government, and city government. So the only government I haven't worked for is the HOA, but I'm thinking of doing that because there needs to be some changes here in my community. So I'm pretty familiar with, I'm somewhat familiar. And when I was told that I couldn't go to work, I knew that that was wrong. I knew that no individual has the right to tell me what I can and can't do. The only thing that can tell me what I can and can't do, and this is where we're going to get into some of this fun stuff, you guys, in terms of law. So, for example, there's a stop sign, and I'm not going to go through it because I don't want to get in a car accident. And it's there's a big red stop sign, and I also don't want to get a ticket. And a lot of our behavior is governed not only by our own morals and judgment, like I'm not going to steal something because I know it's wrong, but there's also a penalty if I steal something. And for some people, the penalty is the only thing that's going to stop them from stealing something. And for other people, you don't need a penalty because it's like, I'm not going to steal because I know that's wrong. So I knew this was wrong. I knew that it was wrong, that no one could tell me that I couldn't go to work. And I knew that it was wrong that no one could tell me that I had to stay home. And not only tell me, but to tell everybody. So I may have been like many people in the very beginning where I was just astonished, and I'm posting all this stuff on social media, in particular Facebook, which is where I happen to be active. And because I'm a researcher by nature, I've published many hundreds of articles in health and fitness and love to research and find out information from the direct source. I don't have a TV. I never watch TV. I don't have a radio, don't get a newspaper. I go to the direct sources. So I rolled up my sleeves and I went to the CDC. Now, you know, I'm not saying the CDC has infallible information, but they were the ones that were disseminating this information. So I wasn't getting it second or third hand from ABC News. I went right to the CDC. And I was astonished when I could easily find the statistics of how many people had died of the flu and pneumonia in previous years. And I found out what those numbers were for California. And then I compared them with the current numbers of California. And it was so far out of bounds that it wasn't even in the same ballpark. So then I figured out, under what authority does a governor have to issue an emergency order? And it's very simple, it's very clear, it's very easy to read. So I made a video about the state of emergency in California is null, void, and invalid. And that video went viral. I just actually had to make a YouTube channel just to put that video up. And I was doing it I was so tired of arguing with people on Facebook. My husband said, look, sweetheart, Facebook is like a bar brawl. Nobody's in there nobody's there to hear what you have to say. People go on YouTube, they want to learn something. There's a lot of, tutorials, and people go to figure something out. He said, I go on there to learn how to fix the drain and do this and that. So I said, you're right. People do want to watch videos on YouTube. That's why it's there. So I made this video, and it was uploaded on many platforms by many different people on many different channels on YouTube. And people kept telling me that they kept finding a dead end. Every time they went to click on it, it was already taken down. And so it's been taken down many times. It is back up on my original channel, The Healthy American Peggy Hall. It's probably going on maybe 200,000 views at this point. After many, many, the reason I'm saying this is it was astonishing to me that I was the first person, to my knowledge, to expose this fraudulent activity behind these so-called emergencies. Many people, to this day, a year later, have no idea that there's a health officer in their community, that health officers are the ones that are creating these orders, that these orders are under a very flimsy, illegitimate emergency measure by their governor. And so, being a teacher, I just set out to educate people as to how to find the law. They're not laws, but how to find these orders, how to find the statutes that allow a governor to issue or call an emergency. In many cases, like in California, those emergency orders only last for 60 days and they automatically expire. In California, the governor never came out and said the emergency is over, but what he did is a de facto ending termination of the emergency, because to the day, 60 days later, it was like 61 days later, he came out with a new executive order, which only applies to the executive branch of government. It does not apply to any individual citizens unless those individuals work in the executive branch of government, like for the DMV or Department of Fish and Game or something like that. So that's what launched the Healthy American. People asked me, how do I find those laws? How did you know about it? Where can I find them? So I decided to create a full-fledged website, which in a period now of just shy of a year, because I sent that video out in May. The website's like an encyclopedia. I mean, you can find, we've researched every single state law. We've compiled them that have to do with discrimination, the laws that prohibit and protect people from discrimination. I've probably the one person known for educating people on what a public accommodation is, the laws that protect people from discrimination, the notion of a direct threat and how we aren't one, how you have to have a sworn affidavit from a doctor that says you are carrying an infectious disease, and that has to go to a court, and then that has to have a judge say that you are contagious, and there's a court order of quarantine against you, and aside from that, you have the right to be in public. So I'm pretty much synonymous with this whole notion of serving notices of discrimination to people in terms of the grocery stores that are violating the rights. And a lot of this is just common sense. And a lot of it is just like, I still can't believe that many people think that what I'm doing is anti-government, anti-mask. I'm not anti anything. I am pro civil rights, pro human rights, pro God-given rights, and yes, pro natural rights, which I know you guys are all about. So that's my long introduction. And I was let go of my 2 part-time jobs, and happy to be so that I can devote, 20 hours a day to this work that I will never stop doing.
That's a phenomenal story. One thing that I love is that this characteristic that you've always had about you, being curious, right? It's a rare quality. People being curious about any type of information and asking that one question, that super important question of why. And then you go down the paths and the rabbit holes, but you got to ask why to get down to the solution and the causal level of issues. So that's a phenomenal story.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I've been curious by nature. I think my whole life has been geared around skepticism. I don't take anything at face value. I've had some personal experiences earlier where my dad met his demise because of medical terrorism. I just got off the phone with a very distressing situation, because I counsel a lot of people from all over the country, all over the world, actually, thousands of inquiries pouring in for help. And many of these people are caught off guard. I mean, here we are a year later, and people are still taking their loved ones to a hospital. I would never take a loved one to a hospital, ever, ever. I would never do it. I would go to my veterinarian first. And I'm always recommending to people that they find another way. You've got to create these alternative communities that don't have anything to do with the oppressors. And the story is a common one. The mom, the loved one, who's not very old, a few years older than I am, I'll just put it that way, went in with pneumonia, was put on a ventilator, was put into a medical coma, is in a COVID ICU, and they will not release her until she no longer tests positive for COVID. I said, this is not a jail. This is not a prison. A hospital has no right to hold anyone. It doesn't even make sense. They will not allow the family in to see her. She is dying. She's been on a ventilator for however last 6 weeks, in a medical coma, unable to make any decisions for herself. They are not allowing any of the loved ones to go in there. And what is my advice? My advice is have her discharged immediately. You go now and you go and bring her home. There are no other choices. These people are not abiding by the law. So it's astonishing to me that a year later, coming up on a year later, people are still uninformed as to what is really going on. I get calls daily or requests for calls. I can't field them all from parents who are asking me if they can go up against their school board to undo these policies that are requiring children to suffocate themselves. And my question is why? Why do you have your child in public school? Next to the hospital, it's the next most dangerous place to be.
Yeah.
They can vaccinate your child in California without your consent. They can quarantine your children in that school. When you send your children to a public government school, you have given them over to the state to do what they want. Read it, read those policies. You have abdicated your parenting. I'm outraged. And I have a remedy for everyone. I don't care if you're divorced, single, working, not working, retired, elderly, in ill health, if you have special needs kids, I don't care. I have a remedy for everything. And none of those remedies include putting your child into this dangerous position and place of a public school, period. I'm trying to keep it together here, friends. I am absolutely outraged at the utter genocide, terror, oppression, and tyranny that is going on. And what bothers me more than the government doing that is that the people are going along with it. I expect the government to be corrupt. I don't expect people to eagerly, giddily, and willingly line up and give over their rights.
Yeah. Yeah. The conditioning and the programming, people need to look in the mirror and understand that they're attached to these systems, and they shouldn't be, because they are corrupt. All the signs, the patterns are all there for millennia. We see these systems are all about control. So, and I tell friends and family all the time, pull your kid out. Why is public school your only option? It's like, you got to have faith in yourself and take personal responsibility.
You just said the two magic words, and that is, yeah, the conditioning is complete. People do not want to take personal responsibility. They actually want someone else to tell them what to do. They don't want to research the treatments that are available for this or any illness. They want the doctor to tell them what to do. They don't want to even research the side effects of prescription drugs. They will just take them rather than look into other means and methods. They would rather send their child to a school, suffocating them, and the physical result of that is far less harmful than the lifelong psychological harms of a child who knows it's wrong to cover their face, and then to be told by an adult in authority that it's the right thing to do, thereby setting up a lifelong distrust of their own innate knowledge and wisdom. And then we've got a society of a bunch of messed up people, which is probably what's been going on for generations. And as an educator for 30 years at the college and university level, working, training K-12 teachers in professional development, I would never, under any circumstances, recommend a child to be in a public school in California. I can't speak for the other states, but if they're anything like California, you better look at that carefully.
Yeah. So when you say you're looking at the statutes, those would fall under UCC that you're looking at, like because there's so many different like jurisdictions with law, which is I think part of the it's part of the scam, right?
There's a big
It's,
scam
you
going
know,
on.
it's, you've got people who are trying to work through common law and, sovereign citizen type movements, but you're looking at the actual statutes that the state government is putting in place, and you're reading what those say, and you're even finding within those laws that they've created, it's still not valid. You're finding places where it's not, they basically shouldn't stand, but the people don't know that, so then the people basically police themselves, right?
You're absolutely right, Johnny. So there are different types of laws, there are different layers of laws, there are different jurisdictions, as you say. What I'm looking at are these laws that I say are on the books. So there are basically just a few sources of law, and basically there's one source of law, which is natural law, and that is our inherent God-given rights, as I referred to them, that you are born with. You are born with certain rights. A right is something that can't be taken from you. It's not a privilege. It's not a good idea. It is something that you have, that is yours, that may not be taken from you. The law on the books says without due process of law. So the Constitution, people get confused and they think that the Constitution gives us rights. The Constitution describes the American form of government. That's what it does. And interestingly, the first article of the Constitution describes the, because it's the only country in the world that has this form of government. We're the only country in the world that is not, and let me just look at face value here, that was not created under a king or queen. And many will say, yes, we are. We're still under British rule. Well, we can talk about that. But let me just say at face value, we were told that this country is not under a king. We don't have a king of the United States, although there are some that wish they were and act as though they are. Queens as well, if we look at the governors and so forth. But that's not our political system of government. So our political system is a constitutional republic. A constitution is a contract. Republic means of the public, republic, we the people. If we look at it in a pristine manner, in the way we wish it was organized, it would be that we the people give our consent to be governed. And we can withdraw that consent, meaning our approval, our agreement. And that is why it is so important for we, the people, to oversee what's going on at all these levels of government. Many people didn't even know that they had a county government. All they knew about was a governor and maybe their mayor. They had no idea that these county health officers, in most places it's through the county and the state, were these unelected officials were issuing edicts that people started to follow. There is zero authority for that, for any one person to tell you to do anything. And I know that because our Constitution describes our form of government. And it is so important that laws are made by a legislative body, not by a king, not by a queen, not by a prime minister. It is made in a law-making procedure by a law-making body. Are there a lot of shenanigans? Absolutely. Are there regulations running amok? Absolutely. Are there regulations and statutes and orders and ordinances that are illegal, unlawful, and unconstitutional? There's an abundance. But if we go back to the structure of the government, the Constitution described the legislative branch of government first, because it set this country apart from every other country. It described what it can do, how the laws are made in a Senate, in a Congress. That same structure then is what the state governments are based on. There is a legislative body in each state which makes laws for that state. No governor can make a law, no mayor can make a law, no sheriff can make a law, no judge can make a law, and certainly no health officer can make a law. That is defined in our Constitution. The Constitution describes the presidency, which is the executive branch, and the Constitution describes and defines the judicial branch, which is the court. It is intended that these are three co-equal branches of government where there are checks and balances. If a law is passed, even though it's passed in a lawmaking procedure, if that law is in opposition or in conflict with the Constitution or our Bill of Rights, which I'll talk about, then it is null and void. But it's not enough to just say that is null and void. It goes to a judge, and the judge rules and affirms and reaffirms and upholds the fact that that law is null and void. It has happened throughout our entire history. We have that procedure also in each state. For some reason, ignorance and maybe intentional deception, people have this idea that the governor said, the governor said, the governor's mandate, the governor said, there's a governor's new law. It is absolutely nails on a chalkboard to me, and I will not stop talking about it. In California, I was relentless. I mean, I have t-shirts that say no governor can make a law. Every other one of my videos has that statement. And finally, the governor of California, and I have him on video saying it at a press conference, he said, I can't mandate anything. I can only encourage, which is exactly the truth. He cannot make a law. Only the lawmaking body can do so, and those are called statutes. So there is constitutional law or yeah, that's one source of our law. Statutory law are laws that were passed by the state or by the federal government that are intended to describe or define or uphold these rights that we have. They're not intended to create new and additional burdens, which is why so many of these are unlawful. The Bill of Rights, also known as the amendments, the constitutional amendments, the Bill of Rights is what spells out that we have the right to assemble. We have the right to address our grievances to our government. We have the right to freedom of religion. We have the right to freedom of speech. We have the right to earn a living. We have a right to our property, our body, we have the right to acquire property, which means I have the right to go and buy a car or go into a grocery store and buy a loaf of bread. And that may not be infringed without due process of law. Due process of law means I'm in that judicial, that third branch of government where I can go and air my grievances and have the disputes settled. So statutory law was passed in a legislative lawmaking body. Out of those laws come regulations. This is where our country has gone downhill. Regulations are created by these agencies and departments like the DMV, all right? The Department of Education in your state, the Department of Fish and Game. In some states, they might have a commission on gambling or what have you. Those things are not, all of the smaller regulations and things are not passed through a legislative process. I'll give you an example. In California, the legislature passed a law that said you have to be 16 in order to drive. So there's the law. Now the DMV can make regulations, rules, and policies to carry out that law that you have to be 16. They create forms, they can create the driving test, they can decide which pattern you're going to go take your test, what time the DMV is open. That's not passed by the legislature. That's not passed by the Senate and assembly of your state. Those are regulations that are passed by these agencies. However, those regulations go through a lawmaking procedure. They don't just say them. There's a time for public comment. Not that they care what the public says, but in some cases it has an impact. You have the right to know what those regulations are, and that's a type of administrative law. So when you're in your state, you've got your administrative courts, that those that oversee the Alcohol and Beverage Control Board. We call it the ABC here in California. You've got your barbering and cosmetology license. You've got your medical license. All of these are types of regulations that are really created in not a constitutional manner, but they are on the books and we are expected to abide by them. And I think this is our intersection, friends, where there are all sorts of regulations and things that are not lawful, that we just go along with because we're either ignorant or, as you said, Chill Will there, that people don't want, it's the personal responsibility. They don't want to be responsible for learning. So anyway, I've been quite long-winded, but I'm very passionate about all that.
Oh yeah, no, that's beautiful. Um, the logical fallacy, the appeal to authority, and I want to go back and touch on education because it's all about education. We don't, the majority of people don't know their rights, and they don't know what rights are. A right is any action that does not cause harm to another being, and nobody can delegate these rights, and you can't grant them or take away. And you know, back in the day, parents used to teach and educate their kids, so information was a little more pure. As soon as the state gets involved, and then these corporations, they obviously are teaching the next generations what to think, not how to think. And here we are now in 2021, and people are completely ignorant. Even this word, when I say this word, people get fired up because nobody likes to be called ignorant, but it means lack of knowledge. And that's what we have nowadays. We have a lack of knowledge across the board.
You're absolutely right. And that is also by design. When you look back at the beginning of our country and those that came, I believe many of them had very pure intentions. They wanted to live in freedom. Maybe there were other things going on, behind the scenes, but I believe that the spirit of freedom is written on every human's heart. And that is why people seek that. That is why people die for that. And it, in my view, takes a lot to undo that. And that is that mind manipulation and the taking control of that natural desire for liberty. Because in the early days, it wasn't even the early days. I mean, for 200 years before this country became the Union of the United States, there were colonies, the 13 original colonies. These were full-fledged, thriving communities. And I would like to go back to that idea. I am of the mind that the more local, the smaller, the easier. I mean, I live in a community, there are like about 300 homes in this community where I am. I actually don't even know all of my neighbors, and there's only 300 of us. How in the world, and we can't even decide when the pool should be open, how many months out of the year, should the parking be for guests or residents, and there's only 300 houses and we can't even decide those things. How in the world can there be a top-down government that decides for 300 million people what is the best thing to be done? We can't even figure out, think in your own family. You may not even be able to decide, do you want to have Mexican or Chinese food, or what movie you're going to watch, or which car to buy. This is the essence of liberty and freedom, that our own individual desires and dreams and goals and so forth. So in my view, the smaller, the better. So this idea of the 13 original colonies, they had their own currency, they had their own language, they had their own communities that made sense for them. They were very reluctant to be a part of the Union because they didn't want to go back to a centralized national government. I don't like that word national. I will never use it. We don't have a national government. We are a federation of independent states. People forget that. And that, I was trying to tie back into your comment about teaching kids at home. Back in those early days, there were no formal schools. I like the idea of the one-room schoolhouse, and possibly there may have been kids, they read from the Bible. That's how they learned to read. And they were taught by their family. They were taught important practical skills. They weren't even taught, they learned them Children don't need to be taught. Children learn and discover and grow and explore on their own when it is unfettered and not suffocated and strangled by public education. To me, that is the number one. I have a couple of goals at the Healthy American. Number one is getting the kids out of school. I've got a philosophy and an approach called freedom learning. You need to get your kids out of school today. There's no deadline. You don't have to worry that they're going to fall behind. They are going to soar. They are going to hop, skip, and jump over their peers once they are out of that suffocating structure of 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. and you only learn math at 1 hour and then the next hour is science. That's not how the brain works. It's the worst possible way of learning. So you got to get the kids out of school. And then the second thing that I really focus on is keeping the businesses open. And the third thing that really is of importance to me is the defenders, the law enforcement, because we can create these societies, these alternate communities and freedom societies and freedom communities, but we still have to have that missing piece of defense. And so that's, I don't even know how I got off on that topic, you guys, but
we're flowing.
We're flowing. We're flowing.
Well, as I'm reading my list of questions, I'm like, there's just so many things that we could talk about. But one thing I wanted to tie in was a thought that we had in, studying natural law and then looking at the founding fathers and what they built is under natural law, and which we consider true anarchy, which anarchy means no rulers. It doesn't mean no rules. The word actually breaks down. Is without, is Greek for without, and archon is Greek for rulers. So anarchy is no rulers, but the rules are under natural law, but you have to use your reason and and understanding to understand what that is. Like what do I have a right to do and what do I don't have a right to do? Well, that breaks down to two pretty easy principles. The non-aggression principle, right? I don't harm you, you don't violate me, I don't violate you, and the self-defense principle. And what I think is pretty amazing about the Constitution is that I believe those are the amendments, the first and the second amendments, that they coded natural law in the Constitution. And then I agree with you also that if we could get back to that, it feels like from there, all this other stuff was added that kind of convoluted it. And obviously there's people who are purposefully, muddying the water, so to speak, in terms of our laws and what's appropriate, and not educating people about rights, not educating people how to think. So I do think that there's a power to the Constitution. We have to unearth it, and we have to show people what those true principles are and what they were talking about. I want to ask you specifically about some successes you've had. I know that you were dealing with a lot of action, going into stores, going into businesses without a mask. And I just wanted to know, like, how you feel like that's worked out, what kind of successes you've had. Have you worked with any businesses or stores that have gone along with, your ideas, or is mostly everybody just falling in line? And I even saw at one point you were even kind of considering maybe like a shopping time where you didn't have to wear a mask. So just kind of want to know like what successes and failures you've had throughout this experience.
So I'm here in Southern California, and I live in Orange County, which is a very large, it's very populated. We have over 3 million people in Orange County, but it's a very small county by geography. So we're kind of bump into each other. And it's been a very active location for people standing up for their rights. To my understanding, it was the first in San Clemente, it was the first city to have any type of protest against these shutdowns. I don't call them lockdown because that's a prison term, and we have a key to our house, and they want us to believe that we're prisoners, but I will not participate in that. So, the shutdown or the illegal, unlawful stay at home and so forth. So early on, and I'm talking about a few weeks after all of this, after the 2 weeks went by, people are out in the street with signs and, you know, honking the horns and hugging each other and saying, oh my gosh, what's going on? This is crazy. So from that has been a very, very active fight for our freedom. So there are a lot of leaders in this freedom community here in Orange County that are my colleagues. And because of that, we have a very, very strong presence at our Board of Supervisors. The Board of Supervisor is the county government that oversees the health officer. The health officer in California and in probably every state has limited power in declaring a local health emergency. A local health emergency is not about public, it's not about individual health. A local health emergency would be something like there was you know, an oil spill off the coast, or there was a chemical explosion at a, you know, industrial park or something like that. And then they are able to say, you can't go in that building is off limits. In California, the local health emergency can only last for 7 days. And after 7 days, that has to be ratified by the governing body. Because remember, only a body of individuals that has a legitimate lawmaking authority can make these laws. One person can't. Well, the problem is, it never was ratified. Well, it was ratified, but it never underwent review. It's supposed to undergo review every 30 days. So as a group of concerned, freedom-loving individuals, we started to organize and would get people to go to these county meetings where before they might have had 3, 4, 5 people show up to see what contract was being signed with the sheriff or what have you, how money was being spent. I don't think they made these meetings very interesting, and a lot of people weren't interested in going to them. But once they said that they were going to mandate masks in Orange County, oh, the gloves were off. Everybody showed up. We had hundreds upon hundreds of people. They had to cut our speaking time from 3 minutes to 2 minutes to a minute. I'm surprised they even still allow us to speak. And we were going in person, which is our right. So because of that, because of our, I call it local and vocal, being very visible, writing the letters, making the phone calls, being there in person, they repealed what was known as the mask mandate. I don't even like to use that word because mandate has no legal meaning. It's either a law or it's not a law, and this is not a law. So the Board of Supervisors back in the end of May said, we are changing the mask requirement to strongly recommended. So that was a huge victory for us. And I have a fiery speech on the homepage of the Healthy American. It's a 1-minute impassioned speech where I say, you're breaking the law. Here's the law. You're breaking it. And what are you going to do about it? They didn't go as far as repealing the emergency, which they really need to do because they're still operating under fraud. Fraud is when you misrepresent information in order to receive gain. They are calling, and I guarantee every state, every county, every city is calling for a health emergency so that they can get the CARES Act funds. They get money in a time of an emergency. An emergency, a third grader can tell you that an emergency does not last a year. An emergency is immediate, it is unanticipated, it's like first aid. You break your leg and you go into the emergency room and they put a cast on it and then you leave. Is your leg healed? No. Are we out of the woods on whatever this is? No. Is it an emergency? No, because they've had a year to get everything in order. So they are milking this idea of an emergency to receive money. That's fraud. Fraud is a felony. A felony carries a prison sentence. I just heard today that like 4 out of the last 8 governors in Illinois have served time in prison. And I can tell you that our former sheriff of Orange County spent time in prison. Currently, right now, Los Angeles County is probably the largest county in the United States, if not one of the largest, if not the largest. The previous sheriff and the undersheriff are both serving hard time right now. They're in prison in Texas. So it's not out of the imagination that these public servants are going to be serving time for their fraudulent duties. Many of them are leaving. If you look around the country, this is a really fun thing to do for anybody who wants to, just in your own state, do an internet search and find out how many different health officers there have been in the last year. So in California, we've already gone through 3, 4, 5, 10, maybe even more when you count all the counties, including our state health officers that have had the revolving door. Many of them, by the way, have worked for the CDC. There are health officers in Hawaii, all the health officers, Health and Human Services, all those people resigned. It's going on and on and on because I believe they don't want to serve time in prison. They know that they're committing fraud. So getting the masks gone is a huge win. The second thing we did under my direction and advocacy is we drafted letters to go to all of the departments of transportation throughout the United States to tell them to take down those highway signs that said, stay home and wash your hands. Seriously, I'm driving on a freeway and there's a flashing light, maybe not in your state, but in California, it was all over the place. A flashing, it's only supposed to be for road hazards. And they're telling you to stay 6 feet apart and stay home and save lives. So we did a massive letter writing campaign. There are still a few old holdouts. I think maybe Arizona has not come to their senses, or maybe the people in Arizona didn't take it far enough. You can't stop after the first rejection. You have to keep going. You send one letter, you send another, you follow up, you say, show me the law. Show me the law that says you can create a road hazard by me looking at a sign that says, wash your hands. Oh, am I supposed to pull off the road and wash my hands? So most of those are down. We got rid of signs that were on the sidewalk in Laguna Beach, the next city over from me, that said, wear a mask, it's the law. It's not a law. Now they still have the sign that says wear a mask, but they took away the part that says it's the law. Many healthy Americans have written to CVS and Home Depot and Walmart. Some of them are unmoving. I mean, I would just, Costco, forget it. Sprouts is another place. Smart and Final, forget it. You're not going to get anywhere. These are criminals. Criminals break the law. They are law breakers. They don't care about following the law. But many of these other larger companies have removed the signs that say, wear a mask, it's the law. They leave the sign that says wear a mask, but they take off the part that says it's a law. It is not a law. A law has a code of law. There's a number attached to it. And there's a penal code if you violate the law. If you run a red light, the cop's going to pull you over. He's going to give you a ticket and he's going to check the box with the penal code. He's not going to make it up. When they try to close down these businesses, they're making up the letters and the numbers. There is no law that requires a business to close. There is no law that requires any business to limit the number of patrons it serves. There is no law that requires any business to require their employees or their patrons to wear a mask, to stand on a circle, to use hand sanitizer. All of those things, as a matter of fact, are breaking the law. You cannot tell someone to stand on a circle and not move. That's unlawful restraint. You can't give medical advice to put on a medical device, which a surgical mask is defined. And again, I mean, I will take credit for it. I have helped educate people as to this, that the surgical masks are classified by the FDA as a class 2 surgical medical device. You cannot require someone to undertake a medical intervention unless you're licensed in the practice of medicine. So these things to me are just common sense, but the law enforcement doesn't understand it. They're still arresting people for trespassing illegally. They're not trespassing. The arrest is illegal. So we're working on many, many of these cases. There have been hundreds of businesses personally that I know, maybe even more, that have gone through my business program, the Open for Business, where I show them exactly the laws that prohibit the government from shutting down their business, the laws that protect them and their right to their property. A governor shutting down a business is no different than coming and stealing money out of your pocket. These businesses, in many cases, are ignorant. They're lacking in the knowledge. They are afraid. They don't want to stand out. And many of them are receiving that CARES Act fund money. So they would rather get the measly, few $1,000s or maybe $250,000. I don't know the limit on it, in order to not go to work and get the government handout and comply with evil. And then they think they're going to go back and open up their business. They're in for a rude awakening.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that thing about the masks, because I was going to ask you the question. So first of all, the silver lining of COVID is that look at what you created, right? I started this website in July of last year. I started going out with signs that were like, basically just trying to plant seeds in people's minds about where your rights come from, just basically an education demonstration about natural law. And we'll have people come up to us. Like, we were in the city this weekend, and the city is just very liberal, very, they're very brainwashed, and they think we're brainwashed, and they think we're Trump supporters automatically. But one of the arguments we'll get is, well, no shirt, no shoes, no service, right? Like a store can tell you can't wear a shirt. So I was going to ask you about that, but that's the answer, is that telling you to wear a shirt is not telling you to put a medical device on your face, or so
Harm. That's the key component. They're causing harm. And that is a violation of cosmic law, God's law, natural law, because your body is your property. And when someone does that, what they're actually doing is they're making a claim on your body. And that is the definition of slavery. So
that summarizes it exactly. And if people will just understand that simple concept, you don't need to know all of the codes of law and the regulations and your right. That simple concept, your body is your body. It is your property. No one else has a claim over it, period.
Mhm.
Period. There is no exemption. The other question that comes up is, because that is the no shoes, no shirt. And first of all, there is no law that says no shoes, no shirt. There are decency laws where you do have to wear clothes in public, but they are not telling. It could be a sweater, it could be a tank top, it could be anything, a jacket. They're not prescribing that. And you're exactly right. A shirt is not a medical device. You don't breathe out of your feet. And the other thing that they will say is that the store has the right to make any policy that it wants. It cannot make any policy that violates established law. A business cannot require every person to take a sample of a ham sandwich. It's not possible. What about the Muslims? And they say, well, we're applying the mask requirement to everyone equally. Therefore, it's not discrimination. That's the exact definition of discrimination, is that you are not allowing for those who choose not, for whatever reason, to not participate in that non-law. Could they require a Sikh to remove his turban? Could they require you to put on a turban? Businesses cannot enforce any policies that are illegal, unlawful, and again, go against our own God-given rights. So that is it really in a nutshell.
So I do have a question about, in terms of legislation, what would you say about the validity or the invalidity of AB 262, which they passed at the end of 2019, almost like they knew something was coming, which basically is like the quarantine law, right? It basically gives power to the health department. So how do you feel about that, in terms of that was actually a bill that the legislature went and passed, even though there was a lot of objection to it? Is it invalid? Do you think it needs to be challenged, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it is completely invalid, as most of those things are. The notion of public health is something that needs to be questioned right at its face. Okay. I don't believe in public health. There's individual health, and we are individuals. I don't believe in public wealth. What's in my pocketbook has nothing to do with what's in your pocketbook or your bank account. Is there such a thing as public ambition, public intelligence, public diligence, public persistence. No, these are individual characteristics. My health status has no impact on anyone else. Oh, but the emergency rooms are going to be overrun. Well, why? Who? Where's the evidence of that? Why does that even matter? There is no proof of that. That is another spurious argument in order to create fear. Years ago, my dad and my brother, when they came out with the seatbelt law, they refused to put on a seatbelt. And they said, it's my body. I don't like that feeling of restriction. I don't like it. It's uncomfortable. Not only is it uncomfortable, it's my body, it's my right. Me wearing a seatbelt has nothing to do with anyone else. And they were exactly right. This is probably where I get some of my advocacy. And it was a joke in our family, because if ever a cop car came by or something, they would be scrambling for the seatbelts. They never wore a seatbelt. Well, Peggy, that is so irresponsible. What if they got in an accident? How is my dad not wearing a seatbelt have any impact on anyone else? The same thing with bike helmets for children. Now, if an adult parent wants to decide that it's safer for their own individual child to wear a bike helmet, that's fine. But one child wearing a bike helmet has no impact on anyone else. Well, it's going to overrun the hospital. Isn't that what hospitals are there for? Build more hospitals then. Those are spurious arguments that have no validity. It's like saying that I have to wear a raincoat in order to protect you from the rain, or that I'm going to put on sunscreen so that you don't get sunburned. None of these examples are, I mean, they're laughable, but no more laughable than I would wear a mask to keep someone from getting sick. It's absolutely ludicrous. But to answer your question there, Johnny, about this bill, and I want to remind everybody that these bills have a number like AB 262, but then it is signed into law. So it's no longer AB 262. There are actual statutes now that are written into law, and some of these include, in California, Health and Safety Code 101080 and 101040, I believe, is the one that says the health officer can take possession of any person's body, living or deceased. How do you like them apples? I don't like them at all. It's completely unconstitutional. It does need to be challenged. It needs to be challenged in court. And the way these things are challenged in court are either with a judicial review or when someone has actually been harmed. So let's say that you're a parent and you have a child who has chickenpox. And the health officer comes and says, under this authority, I'm going to take this child because that's what the law says. Any person, any body, any physical body, living or deceased. And you're the parent saying, no, you can't take my child. And the health officer comes with a sheriff and maybe at gunpoint. I'm not saying this happens. I'm just giving an example. Or maybe the child is at school and goes to, this is a much more likely scenario. You send your child to school, child starts itching. They've got chickenpox or measles or mumps or, something that is not deadly, but they will say that that child is at a threat now to the rest of the children, and they will quarantine your child without your approval or consent. This law gives the ability to that health officer to take your child into custody for a period of quarantine without your consent. Further, that child can be experimented upon. That law says that by under force, they can take bodily fluids from you. They can give you a vaccination and any other medical experimentation they want to do. Are you okay with this, people? I'm not okay with it. I'm not okay with it whatsoever.
They can destroy your property. It's written in there.
They can destroy your property and your animals. They can come in. They can kill all of your animals. They can burn your house if they believe, and trust me, friends, this is what's coming. All right. Those of us that don't get a vaccine, those of us that don't obstruct our breathing, they are going to, their long game is to say that we are the killers. We are the murderers. We are putting the rest of society at risk. And therefore, if we don't consent to being tested or to being vaccinated, that they can't prove that we're healthy. We've come to a society now which is called sick until proven healthy, guilty until proven innocent. It is the exact opposite of what the Constitution created for us in our contract. And you're exactly right, Johnny. It is chilling. They can, and I will tell you that this happened a year or two previously. I'm about to do a video, a very horrifying video, and some people are going to know what I'm talking about. They may have even experienced it, where they did this on animals. I think it was in 2017. And they said that there was an outbreak, the avian flu, and they came to people that, like you or me, that we might have a dozen chickens, you know, in the backyard or something. Small farmers, small and large, but a lot of the homestead type of people, and in the most inhumane way possible, slaughtered their flocks. Absolutely ghastly. I couldn't even continue reading the information because it was so unspeakably horrifying.
I
And
heard that that is happening more recently in the UK. They're claiming there's some type of bird flu, and they're telling people they can't have chickens. I mean, I think it's a play for more control over the food production, obviously. But if you're going to do a video on it, you should look into in the UK something like that, something similar like that is happening just a few months ago.
you're absolutely right, Johnny. It's like a 1-2 punch where they terrify the people, they take their property, they limit their ability to produce food. And I think at the root of it is terror, pure and simple. And that's what's going on at all levels. It's a type of harassment and intimidation, and that is one of the most powerful ways to control a population, second in line only to the population policing itself. They don't need to come in and tell me to wear a mask because Trader Joe's is doing it. They don't need to have a law that says I have to be vaccinated because the airlines is doing it. This is called fascism. It's corporate fascism. It is where the companies themselves are making the laws and not the government. One, it's more powerful and there's more control because it's right where it meets us. When we're talking about governors and city councils and mayors, you know, it's like, what do they have to do with me? Well, it has to do with me when I'm going to go buy something or get medical care or try to travel. And that's why they're using these companies. It is a very, very slippery slope. I've been fighting out against it for all of these months. And it is where the fight needs to be, is at these corporations.
Absolutely. Yeah, I always tell people, you know, sometimes people are so focused on the, you know, the politicians or government in general. In reality, it's the public. They're the ones that need to be educated because, you know, these stores or your neighbors, or they're going to be the ones turning you in. And you know, it's just got so many characteristics of Nazi Germany, and people get pissed when I say that, but it's true. This is a dystopian Brave New World 1984 nightmare, and it's going on. And I commend you for doing the work that you're doing, and your passion and energy is just, it's inspiring. So I love it. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. It's really important for people to study history. There is a really interesting book. So my husband's a pastor, and there's a book called Tortured for Christ. And whether you're a person, you know, Christian background, regardless, it's a very important book to read for history, because this pastor was in Romania, and it is about the time of the Nazis and the communists. And it is really heart-wrenching, but also hopeful, because he spent years in prison. He did not comply, and he survived it. And he actually was able to get the truth out to some of the prison guards and the prison wardens. But a very quick glimpse onto why this book is so important. It talks about people complying slowly when the Nazis came. And even though they said, well, I don't really believe, you know, I don't believe what the Nazis are saying, but I don't want to lose my job. And, you know, I I really do want to sell to the Jewish people, but I would be in trouble. So I really can't do that, even though I have Jewish friends. So the Nazism that was creeping in, many of the people were against it, but they complied anyway. The ones that complied, I'll give the example of the preachers in churches. They were told by the government what they could say, a lot like YouTube, right? Like YouTube is the boss. They're very clear what I can say on YouTube and what I can't. And that's what they did in the churches. You can only preach this, and it was mainly to preach in favor of the government. So some of the churches just went right along with it, and they said, well, at least we're open, I better do what the rulers say. And others completely rebelled, and they were thrown into prison. And some of them were released, like this pastor who wrote the book. But here's what's interesting, friends. The very pastors who complied, and the very I'm sure that it also trickled down to the individuals, the teachers and the shopkeepers and all of that. Those that complied with the Nazis, when the communists came in, when the Russians came in, those were the first ones that were exterminated. They didn't say to the pastors, oh, you were going along with it. Well, good. We'd like you to go along with us. No, they executed them because they knew that they would not stand up for their beliefs, and that if a new regime came in after the Russians, they would go off with them. So those that are complying are the very ones that are going to be first on the chopping block. And I tell this to the businesses all the time. You are either going to hand over your wallet and your business and the keys to your business, or you are going to handcuff yourself to the door and make them cut off those handcuffs. Those are your choices. Complying only makes you more of a target. I've got people here that I've been attempting to help and collaborate with that did everything. They put on the mask. They moved their gym outside. They had 6 feet apart. They made them, do all this nonsense, and they still came after them. Well, you should have had your integrity and dignity. And most of those they're leaving alone because they know that they're a harder nut to crack. So the other thing that struck me, you guys, in this book, they said after the Russians came and it was communism, they wanted the good old days of the Nazis. Communism was so bad that Nazism in comparison was better. I just can never say that enough because I don't think people understand what is at stake here when the direction that we're headed if we don't put on the brakes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the name of the book again?
It's called Tortured for Christ. Richard Wurmbrand is now deceased, but he lived to be quite, I think into his 80s or something, and spent many years in Romania. I believe he did come back to the United States, was in and out of prison. He was tortured. I mean, physically tortured, and still lived to tell about it. And he never compromised, ever. I mean, here I am, I'm in Orange County. Yes, I'm making some sacrifices. I can't go swim in the community pool because I'm not going to put this on. I can't go grocery shopping. I don't have a mask. I've never worn one. I never will. People are making sacrifices. There are plenty of places I'm invited to go speak. I'm not going to get on a plane. I will not compromise. But these are so insignificant. The stories that I hear, like the story I gave you at the top of our show here, where the family is just beside themselves because their loved one is in the prison of a hospital. Can you imagine a hospital telling people they can't come in? It's a public accommodation. It's absolutely heart-wrenching what people are going through. Their losses of jobs. I've counseled women whose husbands have killed themselves. It is unbelievable, the deaths of despair that are occurring, and this is exactly what the powers that be want.
Yeah, for sure. The deaths of despair completely magnitudes shadow the socially perceived crisis, and it is based on fear, right? Because all fear comes from ignorance, that lack of knowledge, and when you're in fear, you're in that fight or flight state. So you're just reacting you're reacting instead of acting. And we talked about following orders, and it's just important for people to step back and gather that courage, and then use critical thinking and start doing some research, start looking to it. It's as simple as, let's see what other people are talking about to lead you down that path.
That's so true. Just open your mind, be open to other perspectives. You said that, Will, just ask why, dig deeper.
Yeah. And I think that's really the beauty and the greatness in what you're doing is, not only are you, through digging into the laws and sort of exposing the corruption within it, and what applies and what doesn't, and how these things are getting twisted into making us police ourselves, and you're exposing that on one hand, which is powerful, but then you're also educating people, and that's really the most important thing, because that's empowering people. And the more we keep doing this, the more we keep pushing that, the more we can get people to realize that these things are not okay. These things are, freedom is something worth fighting for. Freedom is more important than perceived security, and safety. And so, yeah, I think the more you keep pushing and you keep, waking people up, it's just going to keep expanding and growing more and more. So we really appreciate what you're doing, and I could talk to you for another hour.
Well, thanks, guys. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm maybe do a future show, because I'd love to learn more about how we can get that information out about natural law. You're so right. There are so many, I call them hidden gifts. Some of them are more obvious, and engaged public who is learning about their rights. I mean, it's thrilling to me. It's absolutely fantastic that I've got a lot of young kids that watch The Healthy American on my YouTube channel. And they're like, oh my gosh, you're like our civics teacher. I'm using your videos as part of our homeschooling. And so that really warms my heart. And I'm a teacher at heart. I want to keep sharing information and practical solutions. I am looking under every rock, no stone left unturned. I'm trying to devise new solutions, because I am never going to give up. So glad to know that you guys are on board as well.
Fabulous. Excellent.
Definitely. Yes. Thank you for being here. We appreciate it. It was nice to meet you.
Thanks,
you too.
Peggy. Appreciate you.
And
look forward to the next time. Take care.
Definitely. And thank
Bye-bye.
you, Will.
Thanks, brother.
And always remember, put something good in the air and plant something good in the earth. Peace.
We be the natural freedom league, 'cause we become no longer